Christmas. I know that we're a couple days away, which means I have to start shopping here in a little while. I usually start about the 23rd, whether I need to or not. Um, that's a lie, but it's not a big lie. I'm that person nobody likes. I'm the one who waits to the last minute. I've been that way all my life. But anywho, and I'm gonna keep tonight kind of short with you. I've got Mom at home and Chris isn't there, and so I don't like leaving Mom by herself right now. So she's Chris will be leaving here in a few minutes, so I'm gonna kind of do something kind of brief with you this evening. But I do want to extend a Merry Christmas to everybody, to you and your families. Again, it's one of those years we're not going to forget anytime soon. I wish that there was a way to push the normal button. I know we all want to push it, but that doesn't seem to be an option for us right now. We're still kind of up in the air about a week from tonight about the Lord's Supper service we're wanting to have. We will send out a definite word over the weekend and Sunday morning. We'll have made our minds up by then. There's not a lot of setup for this the way we're going to do it, so we can wait a few days until we see how things are going. I really want to do it, but I also want to be smart too. So I'm praying, and the deacons are praying too. But if we do have it, and you can come next Wednesday, it'd be a joy to have you, and we won't keep you long. Certainly, the brevity of time is beneficial too, as far as our concerns about spreading. So if you pass by somebody. Those aren't the ones they're concerned about, but it's when you're together for a long time or several minutes up close. Those are the things that make it the virus a little more likely, I guess, to pass on. Tonight I want to do just a couple things, just in the way of encouragement and getting us to think about Christmas in a way that we know we're supposed to, but we don't always do it. I spent today looking at some different thoughts about how Christmas came about in our history. And it like anything else, it wasn't just a bed of roses. It didn't just start with Jesus in the manger and then, it just became everybody's thing. It took a long time for it to take root as far as how it's celebrated now. I did want to do this because last year I remember reading this to you. I remember looking this up. But it's almost like I do this now almost for fun. Every year Lifeway prints up the top 15 most popular Christmas songs, and they don't just, it's not a popular vote. It's really that they track it by how many people either purchase the music or order something from Lifeway related to that particular song, and at the end of the year they can tally these things up. And churches ordering musicals, Sunday school things, stuff like that. And so they released their top 15. And again, I think this was the same last year. Joy to the World came in at number one. And I actually had wanted to do something about the music tonight, but I knew I was going to be limited on time, so I'm going to keep this very brief. O Come All Ye Faithful was number two. Hark the Herald Angels Sing, number three. The First Noel, number four. And Angels We Have Heard on High, number five. One of the, coming in at number six, I feel like a DJ now all of a sudden, but coming in at number six is Silent Night. And Silent Night has historically been, and I've seen this in print several places, I think the overall number one Christmas song of our history has been Silent Night. It has been recorded, I think, more than any other song. It's been used in a variety of ways. And in looking that up and thinking about tonight, I came across a story that I don't remember. I know last year or 2 years ago I did a thing on a Wednesday night, I think it was, about some of the Christmas music, and we talked about some of it. And I think Dennis Wheeler had given me a great book about how some of the stories behind some of those songs that we know. But on Silent Night, I came across this, and I just wanted to give you the headline of it. It's talking. It actually states here in this. I was trying to remember. This is from Crosswalk, which has a lot of good stuff on it. It said that they called it the most regarded or recorded carol of all time. Talked about how it started off with very humble origins. It kind of gets into this and takes you sort of down the memory lane of how it came about. But it tells this story I thought was very interesting. But it talks about the different ways that Silent Night has been used in history. It has a place. Now, we have to remember, when you start looking back over your shoulder, you're looking at a world that was a whole lot different. I mean, we live in a country now where things have changed drastically. And so, our kids won't think much of it, but if you got any age on you and enough to remember when, you can remember sort of a reverence for Christmas, at least in theory, and a reverence for how serious it was, and you could glean that from the popular music of the day. You could glean that from the politicians of the day. You could glean that from just about at churches, anywhere you wanted to look, and you would have seen some. And there's still a tiny tad of this, but we're also in a world where people don't want you to say Merry Christmas, or they're offended, or if they go into a store and they hear a Christian song being played, we're somehow infringing upon their freedoms or something. And I think I've not done too good a job of hiding my thoughts on some of that kind of stuff. We are there's a whole lot of thin-skinned people out there who demand things, but don't want to take anything, and it's really humorous. And I really do hope someday in history it's pointed out. But I'll be nice for tonight, and we'll just leave it at that. But recently, I saw, I think last year, I was thinking about Silent Night today coming here, and I remember one of the, and we see these commercials, this time of year especially, when we're more giving, more charitable, more sentimental, there's that's in the air, and that's still there too to some extent in our nation. Maybe not what it used to be, but it's not totally gone. So that's when they start playing commercials for certain things that need funds, and some of it's very good stuff that I would wholeheartedly endorse, giving to. St. Jude's and Shriners, those commercials. I mean, certainly, if you have a sentimental bone in your body at all, those, and you can give those are noteworthy things to give to. But I remember seeing one of the commercials about animals that are abandoned or mistreated, and certainly, I'm certainly. That's awful when you hear that stuff. People that would abuse an animal, I would drive them to the bridge and we'll throw them off. Okay, but I remember Sarah McLachlan was singing "Silent Night" when it was doing a commercial about these animals, and I remember thinking, well, that's probably not the best way to use that song. But there is a story here where they tell us history. Something that happened with Silent Night that I thought was pretty interesting. I'm just going to read it. It's just off the internet from Crosswalk. It says, but perhaps the most famous place the carol has been sung was also the most unusual, the trenches of World War I. In December 1914, hostilities had died down between battles as tense English, French, and German soldiers waited for the next bout of gunfire. But on Christmas Eve, what they got instead was an unexpected ceasefire. In certain places along the line, enemy soldiers ventured into no man's land to play games, exchange gifts, smoke cigarettes, and celebrate together as best they could, knowing that in a few days they would resume fighting against each other again. Many men recounted the beauty of the familiar Christmas carols that were sung among the soldiers. And Silent Night was one of the songs that the Germans sang in that war. And I thought that was just very interesting. If you can imagine these trenches and the guns laid aside for a night, and people relaxing and singing some of those songs that, again, these songs are very old. They've been with us for such a long time. And I don't know, that's one of those things that I would put in the good column, something that's actually very encouraging to think about. And that's kind of what I wanted to share with you tonight, just in the way of something brief. You can go back and study history, and Christmas has gone through all kinds of thoughts. I mean, there's a lot of folks out there, even in Christian realms, who have very strong opinions about Christmas. Some in favor of decorating and doing all this stuff, and some not. And that's not a new thing. It's been that way for a long time. In fact, I remember various classes between Clear Creek and Southern Seminary, and some of that stuff would pop up every now and again, almost out of left field, and you're left thinking about, well, who wouldn't celebrate Christmas? But if you go back, and especially during that Reformation era, where Baptists draw a lot of their thinking from. Now, it doesn't mean you agree with everything in the Reformation, but it does mean that our denomination was influenced by the Calvins and the Luthers, and later on people like Spurgeon, who was a Baptist. Those guys kind of matter to our history. They had contributions on a lot of levels. But it was interesting if you go back to that Reformation era. Christmas, as we know it as a festival to be celebrated, really started as a Catholic observance. And of course, this is the Reformation time. There is an issue between what's going to be called the English group and the Catholic group, Henry VIII, and that stuff through there. These splits pop up, and the Anglican Church is birthed, and all of that. And there was a lot of folks that when they broke off from the Catholic Church at the time, they felt that maybe anything that the Roman Church was doing, they wanted to do the exact opposite. So you see the tension. So here they were starting to observe various forms of Christmas. For Catholics, it would have been a mass to celebrate his birth and those things, the birth of Christ. But as this took off and as the Reformation started to take root, they had to decide, okay, what do we really believe about this? That's really how Christian history is formed. Things might seem kind of in an idle place for some time, and then all of a sudden the church gets put in a place, and I'm going to use a phrase here, the true church has to decide, okay, what do we really believe about this? And that's why you have different councils and some of those things of the past where the people got together, okay, if we don't believe that, then what do we believe about that? And that to me, that went a long way in helping me understand why there was councils and why they got together and discussed these things, because you get someone saying, hey, the church believes this, and the church has never said they believe that, then you get put in a position where you need to say something back. And that's how a lot of things got preached on, got recorded in written history, those type of things, where the church spoke up on various issues. And one of those issues was Christmas itself. And some of those names that we actually know, again, Calvin and Zwingli, some of those guys that you heard about and read about like in high school, in social studies in middle school, those names popped up. It's not like this is me on a seminary thing. I was exposed to those names in regular public schools, but you didn't go deep, right? You just knew that they were part of that Reformation era, which was a really big deal for Protestant churches. But there was also, what do we really believe about this? As the Anglican Church split off and some of that stuff was going on, decisions had to be made. And there were some who were very much anti-Christmas. And the reason was, and it's a very simple point, the Bible doesn't do a whole lot with it. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John give us narratives of his birth. I remember one of the great preachers of the past that gets quoted a lot, J. Vernon McGee. I remember when I was first starting to get my library together and starting to really study and appreciated a good book here and there, somebody gave me a set of his commentaries. And at the time, it was the only set I had. And I don't know, J. Vernon and I would agree on everything now, but at the same time, I really benefited from those commentaries. And I still remember him commenting about the birth of Jesus. And he said this, he said, Jesus, the Bible never asks us to remember his birth. It asks us to remember his death. And if you really are fair to the Bible, and if you can kind of sort of put your finger on the tradition button for just a minute, J. Vernon McGee was exactly right. Jesus did ask us to remember his birth, and there's not a whole lot of fanfare in the scriptures about making it part of a remembrance thing. And so how you look at it is a really big deal. For the Roman Church, it was part of what they had instituted, and in those days, when Rome spoke, you did what it said, and that was the end of it. But during this Reformation era, there was this period of people trying, okay, what do we really, really believe? And so some, like Calvin and Zwingli, for example, they had more of the thought of not wanting to look like the Roman Church. Now, I know it's a little bit of history here, but it makes a point. They felt like, okay, if the Bible didn't say a whole lot about remembering the birth of Jesus, then is it right to do a whole lot to remember the birth of Jesus? Now, and just being fair, that there's some validity to that. If the Bible doesn't tell us to do it, do we do it? Now, this is, and what this does, this gets into a lot of, if you're one of those people who likes to think a little bit, it's really kind of an interesting thing to consider. Do we only do what it says, or is there freedom for certain things that the Bible doesn't really seem to address? And that's a bigger issue than you think. For example, Zwingli and Calvin, they were more into the not looking like the Roman Church. So they were very comfortable banning Christmas in that sense. Now, Calvin would go on to later really offer a lot of encouraging words about remembering the birth of Jesus. But Christmas as a holiday, as a place in the church calendar, there was no reference to December 25th anywhere to be found, and that was another issue some people had with it, that if you set aside this date that's not even a real date, and then there was cautions, and Calvin especially would later say that even though he didn't mind recognizing the birth of Jesus, he was very concerned that December 25th would become an idol in its own right, and in some cases it did. I think Calvin wasn't too far off the mark of what could happen, and of course that led to a lot of excesses, a lot of abuses, and us humans, we do that when we get our grubby paws on some things. Sometimes we end up kind of going the extra mile, and things end up not what they're supposed to be, and certainly that's part of what's happened with Christmas. But there were other thoughts too, and I want to touch on these just quickly. Calvin, and all of this you can read. There's just endless pages and websites talking about this kind of stuff, and I have a whole bunch of notes, but I want to be brief because I really do want to get back to Mom. But as you follow that Reformation timeline, again, other people would come later or in that same time frame, and they would have different thoughts. Another one of those big names in the Reformation era was Martin Luther, and Luther loved Christmas. Now him and Calvin are linked together on a lot of things as far as theological issues and even timing. It's almost when you think of one, you think of the other, especially if you've studied church history. And I know that may not be interesting to some of you, but it does. I'm doing this to show you how people can think, and really the whole point tonight is there is a freedom for us to make the most out of Christmas, but we have to really stop and remember what that is. How do we benefit? Is this just something for us to enjoy, or is there some purpose in remembering all this? For Martin Luther came along, and his point was very simple, that the Bible maybe did not tell us to do it, but his argument was it didn't tell us not to. And that's kind of when you study, you'll come across this again and again. There's some people who had the same kind of arguments about music. And what kind of music do you sing in church? Do you sing the music the Bible tells you to sing, or are we free to sing anything we want as long as the Bible doesn't forbid it? Now, what that is, that's two different ways of looking at something. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but there is validity in both. If you're willing to kind of think it through a little bit. And so that was the difference. It wasn't like Luther and Calvin hated each other over this issue, but one felt like we should observe and remember just what the Bible tells us to do. The other one said, but the Bible doesn't say we can't We can worship Him any way. There's no special day. That kind of thing. And see, for a lot of church history, especially as time went on, the Sunday, the Sunday was the day. That was the day we were to honor the Lord, the first day of the week. That was a big deal. And the rest of it, many would call it man-made kind of stuff. In other words, and we see this, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Veterans Day. Those are all wonderful holidays, but they're not in the Bible. Okay, so you see where I'm going. You can, we've not been told we can't do it, but and there's people with different thoughts even on those kind of services. But for Martin Luther, when he came along, his whole point was, and I've read a lot of Luther, and some of you out there have, but Luther felt like there was a joy with Jesus coming into the world. And in his mind, the angels who got really excited and the shepherds who heard the angels the night they made this great announcement that this baby had been born, there was this joy, an unspeakable joy, a heavenly joy that if it could be shared that night, why can't we share in that? Why can't we have joy? And that's a very good argument. That's a good way to look at this. But again, your focus is to be on Christ, and that's where we've struggled. For many of us, it's not an issue of do we think Jesus is important? And the problem is so many other things have crowded Jesus right out of the holiday. We fill our calendars, and of course this 2020 is going to go down in one of those years where nothing was as it has been. And so, we remember that even tonight. But the issue, how do we honor Christ? How do we get our thoughts right and go through this? And so Luther comes along and he finds joy in this. He finds joy in really helping children. There was this, in other words, you look for things in life that give you opportunities as a Christian to promote this gospel, to propagate the gospel. I talked about this Sunday night. And Christmas still gives us that, okay? There's one quote I found. It was a very good one. Forgive me if I had all kinds of paperwork here. Because I just studied a lot of different things. I really didn't know what I was going to do. But here's a quote from Ronald Reagan, and this is not a Republican-Democrat thing, so don't even go there. But this is just a quote that Reagan made about Christmas. He said, "Christmas can be celebrated in the schoolroom with pine trees, tinsel, and reindeers. But there must be no mention of the man whose birthday is being celebrated. One wonders how a teacher would answer if a student asked why it was called Christmas." So Reagan, when he said that, was really speaking of what you would just call the average American's understanding of Christmas. It was about the birth of Jesus. That was really the point. But then it got to where we did still could do the lights and the trees and all these other things, but you just couldn't talk about Him. So how do you take Him out of Christmas and still have a legitimate Christmas? How does this thing flourish if you take Jesus out of it? Well, Luther used it and thought that the idea was that if this door was open to us, then take every advantage that you could to tell people why Christ had come into the world. And he lived in a rough time of history too. I mean, the Roman Church was pressing down. He was a heretic, and you and I are waiting in the wings of how this Reformation is going to take place so churches like ours could do what we do. So we are on the receiving end of a lot of blessings through folks like the Calvin and Luther and Zwingli and Whitefield and Wesley. I mean, you can go back and just tons of names who've been in the line of history that have helped us get to where we are. One of the more modern names, and I say modern only in the sense of the church history timeline, would be Spurgeon. Spurgeon, if you had to kind of jump from big name to big name to big name, Spurgeon will be one of those big names of the 1800s who actually had a very interesting position. And I'm going to share his position, then I'm going to let you go. Spurgeon looked at Christmas. First of all, he had no interest at all, and again, I'm not trying to, tackle too much here tonight, but he was certainly not interested at all in trying to uphold a holiday because the Roman Church said you should, or anybody else. he has some very solid statements about, again, the Lord's Day, yes. The other days that we've singled out and said these are important because of this, and the Bible doesn't say that. Spurgeon had no interest in taking a man-made tradition and putting it on level with what we know God has asked us to do. But by the same token, much like Luther, Spurgeon looked at the world. He pastored in London, and as his years were, we had the Civil War going on over here, and he's preaching in London. Thousands are coming. Just one of the just a very amazing ministry, really, that still we reap benefits from it today through the sermons and the things that he penned down for us. But he looked at London. He kind of looked at Christmas through a different set of lenses. Now Spurgeon is known for certainly that medieval Victorian kind of language he would speak. If you read some of his sermons, it's interesting wording, just the way he would speak. He was a wordsmith if there ever was one. He knew how to. He had been reading Puritan writing since he was a little boy from his grandfather's library, and so by the time he started preaching, he knew more, even as an unconverted person, than a lot of pastors would have known, because he was just well read and well studied and then he finally was converted. But he kind of came at this from the position of that there were benefits that really benefited everybody with Christmas. Not the holiday itself, not December 25th, but what it gave you the opportunity to do. And certainly in his day, which is very similar to our own, at least in some regards, he came across and said, first of all, people work like dogs just to make ends meet. And he was right. It was not an uncommon thing for people to work many jobs and any jobs they could get, because it was an impoverished time. You worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, and kids wouldn't see dad, that kind of stuff. So he looked at it like, okay, first of all, Christmas gives you an opportunity to rest. It brings the family together, okay? And again, it gives you the opportunity to talk about Jesus, what he did, why he came into the world, and it gives you an opportunity to take a break, much like we might think of a Sabbath rest. Spurgeon felt Christmas gave us that, and that was one of the things he was really. He had several quotes out there. You can find several quotes about him being anti-Christmas, but he wasn't anti-Christmas. He was anti-December 25th as some rule to keep, but he was wide open to recognizing the opportunities that Christmas gave the church to speak about Jesus, to help people out, to give families a chance to come together. And one of the articles I read, I thought this was kind of interesting too. It also gave you an opportunity to reconcile the differences that pop up in any family or in any friendship in the course of a year. You're running, you're going, words get spoken, things get forgotten, bitterness sets in. And he actually spoke of Christmas as that opportunity to reconcile those differences, to come together, share a meal together. It was also an opportunity to talk about Jesus, what he did, and go back to Luther for just a minute. Luther also kind of made a contribution, which Spurgeon will point to as well, in the music realm. Luther came at this from the position of getting as much doctrine in our singing, learning how to sing songs that spoke the truth, that actually could carve their way into your heart. And you'll find Luther's name attached to some songs, and there's a reason for that, because he felt like if you're singing some of those Christmas carols, you're learning something. A good Christmas song doesn't just talk about glitter and gold. It talks about Jesus coming to earth, what he's here to do, God's gift, right? And so all of this is being poured out from heaven. God is doing this, and that's where Luther took it and made Christmas this heart-touching thing. Now he didn't. He again, this is not fighting words amongst the brothers of the time period, but it was a different way to look at it. I certainly understand where Calvin and Zwingli were coming from, and I certainly agree with some of their positions there. But I also see what Luther was after. Luther felt like if you could sing a song about Jesus that blessed your heart and blessed the ears of other people to get them thinking about the Savior, he felt that was great. And I remember Danny Aiken from Southern Seminary. He's now the president at Southwestern, Southeastern. But when I was in school, he was the dean of the School of Theology. And he talked about how some of the best theology we all know come from the hymns we were taught since we were little. Luther was part of that movement. You sing a good song says something about what you really believe, and as you sing it, it reinforces as well as proclaims what you really do believe. These convictions come out as you sing. Spurgeon, moving forward, Spurgeon looked at the issues of his day, and he saw Christmas as an opportunity to bring people together, to bring families together. He saw it as an opportunity to help children, impoverished children. There was a ton of orphans and street kids in London. And Spurgeon, one of the things I've always appreciated about him, this great preacher, this one with a vocabulary to die for, and had just a presence for the time period that was above, the average Joe. He also saw the impoverished kids. He saw kids without parents living on the street. And in the course of his ministry, I think they opened up 2 different orphanages. I didn't double check that, but I think he opened 2 in addition to the other things that church was doing. And he would visit those orphanages and visit with the kids on Christmas Day. That was something him and his wife did. And it was something he shed a light on a need that was very real, very important. And I thought that was kind of a sweet thing to think about. And the story goes, one of the stories I did read is that he would give each, he would come in and greet these kids, and he would give each of them a coin. They'd be given food and other things that they needed. But he would give them each a coin. And the story goes that when Spurgeon neared the end of his life, in fact, his last Christmas when he came to visit, he was quite ill. His health had deteriorated, and it turns out it would be his last Christmas. But the story goes that when he went to visit the orphanages on that day, what would be his final Christmas time with them, he would die later, that all of the kids were just really sweet to him. They were they hated that he was sick, and they were very kind to him back. You know what I mean? They loved him back. And those are kind of, that's one of those things you read, and it just makes you smile a little bit, because there's a whole lot of bad stuff. We don't have to try to find the bad in any story or any point in history. Spurgeon wasn't a perfect man by any means, and neither were Calvin or Luther or anybody else. The Wesleys, Whitfields, they all had their flaws. But here you see somebody doing something and kind of shining a spotlight on a need that was right in front of the eyes of everybody in London, which very, very few were doing anything about. And so Christmas to Spurgeon was the opportunity to actually teach these kids, and Luther did the same thing. This gift giving idea was actually pictured in what God did when He sent Jesus into the world. He's giving us this gift that we didn't deserve. It's something because the giver of the gift is this loving, this kind, and this gracious, and that gave the church an avenue to speak. And we still have that. Right now, we still have that freedom to talk about Jesus. Now, the sad part is we often don't. We're a very quiet generation of believers. But right now, it is Christmas time. There is this from Thanksgiving to Christmas, there is this emphasis on helping people, being sensitive to the needs of other people. And so when you study all these guys and you think about what they were doing in their time period, you still come back to your own life, and that's where I'm at tonight. And I found a little article that I thought was kind of good. It's very helpful thinking about Spurgeon, because he kind of sums up what I read about Zwingli and Calvin and some of that stuff that's kind of another study for another time, but I had to go through it to get to where I was at. But he said this, a couple things I want to highlight. And this is just a couple things that he held to, and certainly I've hinted at it, but he says, first of all, Spurgeon believed that the Christmas holiday benefited the hardworking laborers by giving them a day of rest, a day that they wouldn't have had. In fact, you can find, if you study Spurgeon out, you can find where he would later say that he wishes we had 20 Christmases a year because it gave families time to be a family. Spurgeon recognized that if the family fragmented, and again, all these orphans running around, dad's over here, mom's over here, nobody know, he knew the damage that could be, or could be derived from that. Just the other day, I saw a video. If you want your heartstrings touched on, and again, the actor Jack Black. I don't know much about him. I've seen him in a couple of movies. He's known for being funny and loud and all this kind of stuff. But on YouTube, I saw a little clip the other night that talked about him crying at a site or something, and so I just clicked on to see what it was. And he'd gone to Africa, and it looked like a mission trip. He was there to raise money for kids, and he's an American. Like I remember, my first trip to Peru here, and seeing things I'd never seen before, and a town in Peru that we went to just outside of Lima, Pamplona, which was a really impoverished area, really carved right into my brain, in my heart. There was Jack Black is in a place where tons of street kids with no family, nothing, and he's never seen this before, and he's to his credit, he seems as real as any actor I've ever seen. He hangs around with this one kid all day, who has brothers and sisters he's never met. He doesn't know where they are. He never knew who his father was. He lives on the streets. He goes through, he eats out of garbage. And you can see Jack Black is actually processing the data, and I could relate, at least in part. Pamplona did that to me. To see it with your own eyes is something. And so to think of that, and to think of these kids out here without families. The kid that he hung around with all day was 12 years old with no home. And that's real stuff. That's real life. It wasn't a Hollywood story. And if you get a chance, it's on YouTube. Just put Jack Black crying or something like, and you'll pull it right up. And it's about a 4-minute video, and it's one of those good things. It's one of those things that you see somebody actually dealing with the world with lenses they've never had to use before. And again, Christianity throughout her history has had those eyes at various times where she saw things. Spurgeon in his day, Luther in his day, Calvin in his day. They looked out there and they saw that this faith was actually meant to impact what we were looking at. And so this notion of getting the family together, cutting back on, giving them a day off work, no excuses, where they can sit down and eat a meal, spend time together, renew friendships, renew family relationships. He saw the benefit of Christmas, not just in trees and lights and those things, and presents even, but in what it could do to the family, to be together, to be back in a place. He went on. He talked about the idea that the workers getting rest, which most of them would work 7 days a week. They'd work any chance they could get just to make money. And so this was a chance to give them that break. It was a chance for the family to get together. That go home for Christmas, coming home for Christmas mentality. It brought joy. Here in a few days, I get to go home and be with my family. And that's a historical part of Christmas that's still with us. I mean, some of you right now are either expecting company, or maybe you're traveling. You're not even home right now because you've gone somewhere to be there for Christmas. That's still part of our culture. So we still have that. And of course, I know COVID has dented a lot of our plans, but I thought that was really good. He felt like that this birth of Christ, if we looked at it with the right eyes, the right lenses and the right heart, the right mind, that it was a joyful thing. It did a lot of good things. Again, not a rule to be kept, not something that where we let the tradition of it move in and take over. In fact, he was very careful of saying, don't let it become more than it's supposed to be, but use Christmas as an avenue, one, to help strengthen the family, strengthen communities, but also to share the gospel. Spurgeon is the guy who made the comment that no matter what text you're teaching from, read it, and when you begin to preach, get to the cross as soon as you can. It was always about Jesus. And certainly when it comes to Christmas, same rules applied. Yes, family. Yes, rest. Yes, gifts. All that stuff could find a place. But don't forget why you're doing all of this. And Reagan pointed it out. You take Christ out of Christmas. Why are we doing this? And right now, there's a whole ton of TV shows, stuff this time of year, the holidays, Christmas. They don't want to talk about Jesus. It's just more about this thing we do. And again, any average child is going to say, why do we do this? And if you don't have a Jesus to talk about, you end up with a really stammering story of trying to come up with why we do it. And so the fellow who wrote the article about Spurgeon said this, and I'm going to stop. He said just three things that we learned from looking at how Spurgeon looked at Christmas that could benefit us in our culture now, today. This was a very current article. First of all, we should have compassion on those who work hard and struggle to make ends meet. In other words, if you have employees and you can give them a break to be with their families, that's a good thing. If you know of people in a struggle, trying to help take care of their families, and you can help with that. Again, that's something we can do. That is something that Christmas gives us an opportunity, whether it's food, whether it's a backpack, whether it's something that nobody even knows you ever do. It's something you want to do for somebody else because you know they need it. That's a sweet thing, and that's been part of the Christmas tradition from way back, and it's still part of it now. The second thing, he says, is it's the opportunity to get the family together, to talk about your faith, to pray over that big meal and let these kids know why they're opening presents. Talk about those things because it means more coming from your home than it does anywhere else. It's not enough just to come to the building with a steeple on it and hear us talk about Jesus. It's to start right at home. In fact, the Bible's very clear on this, that parents have an obligation to teach their kids. It starts there, not at the church house, but at the house. Your house, my house. And then finally, and he says, and in that discussion too, and this is what this fellow's doing, he says it's also that time to reconcile. You know, what's the New Year's, may old acquaintance be forgotten, and da-da-da-da-da, as a year comes to an end, there's a chance to start fresh. And that's kind of in the Christmas family too, that chance to come together. And if you're a believer in Christ, you've been forgiven. And maybe there's a little thickness in the air between you and a family member or a buddy, a friend, a pal, a neighbor. Christmas gives you the chance to fix those things. And that's a good thing. That's a blessing. And then finally, he talks about how singing these songs keep it real to us. And the good Christmas, and there's a lot of funny, lighthearted, winter wonderland, Jack Frost nipping at your nose kind of stuff that's really fun to sing and all of that. But there's also a lot of those songs that really hit the mark about what God did in sending Jesus and why that was so very important. And a lot of times, if we're not careful, we forget. And the songs keep it real. They're Luther. I amen Luther, because his point was you get truth in a song, and you'll carry it with you. You just will. These Christmas carols for Luther were one of those. He saw them as an excellent way to teach kids to have something when you're old and you're in your 80s and your life is, you've lived your life. You can still move your lips to those carols that taught you something your whole life. And I think that's kind of cool. I know that I know we're all in different places, but there is tremendous pressure on us to forget how important some of the important things are. and we actually have a say in that. You have a say in it, and so do I. So my prayer, and again, this was a whole lot. You can't see all my stuff here, but there's a whole lot of paper in front of me. I just want to encourage you tonight. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. I hope you're able to visit with your family. I hope you're able to enjoy the day. I know things are difficult. I do, and I'm praying for you. We're praying for each other through this. But make the most of these holidays. Enjoy them. Thank God for them. We still, even though we're limited, we still have opportunities. And certainly Christmas still gives us that window to speak. And I hope and pray we'll take advantage of it. I hope when all this is said and done, when there is a normalcy return to our lives, that we can still look back on 2020 and say, I still got to have that meal with my family. I still got to see the grandkids. I got to do those things that I was afraid I wasn't going to get to do. And you realize how special all that is. And so I hope and pray this has been beneficial to you. There's a lot of stuff to throw at you, but I hope and pray it's encouraged you at least a little bit. And I hope and pray you have a good Christmas, a very Merry Christmas. And Lord willing, I'll see you Sunday. I'm taking Mom home Saturday, I think. So, and then we'll let you know Sunday for sure about the Lord's Supper next Wednesday, okay? Not trying to keep you dangling. But the way we're going to do it, there's not a lot of setup. There's not tables or any of that kind of stuff we're going to set up. It'll be very simple and straightforward. But I'll be talking with our deacons, and Scott and I'll get together and throw something together, and we'll make the best decision we can. And if we don't do it next Wednesday, we'll do it as soon as we feel it's safe to do that. But we'll let you know Sunday, okay? Have a great night. Merry Christmas. Enjoy these next couple of days, and keep the prayers going. God bless you.